What's up guys, and welcome to episode 4 of Road to World Record. In this video I'm going to cover my second 21.67 OCR mean of 3, as well as my 19 OCR single, which is my first and currently only official sub 20. I'm going to start off with the mean of 3, and then at the end of the video I will cover the 19. So the mean of 3 was 20, 21, and 24. And as it turns out, I missed a lot of stuff in this mean. I did not get optimal from either of the first two solves DRs that I had, and on the last solve I missed a much better DR that could have yielded, at the very least, something in the 21 to 22 range, and if done optimally could have yielded a 20. So to start off, I'm going to show the 21 I got on solve number 1. So for this scramble, I did RL axis, so orange front, and it's 4 bad edges. The bad edges being here, 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 and here. To start off, I moved these 2 bad edges with an R2 turn. And then here there's 2 ways to do the EO in 3 more moves. You can either do B prime U2 or UB prime. I did B prime U2 R. And this instantly gave me DR minus 4C4E, and it's a very short case. It can be done in 4 moves just on this side. I did L2, and then you just do U2, D2, B. It's also worth noting you can insert like a B2 or an F2 at this point, and that will become relevant when I show what I missed, as I believe the most findable 20 comes from one of these variations. But in the actual solve, I did U2, D2, B, to give me an 8 move DR with 4 quarter turn corner 2C 2E, which is one of the better 4 quarter turn sets. I believe it's probably the best one, maybe aside from fake HTR. But still a really, really good case. What I did to start off was I inserted an F2, because you need to insert some sort of half turn before making a quarter turn of progress, just with how the pieces are laid out. So I did F2 and then U, and that gave 3 quarter turn 2C 4E, and then from here I reduced to 2 quarter turn 4C 2E by doing B2, B2 and then U prime. And now we have this kind of case. We've got these blocks here, and you can just finish the HTR by doing L2, F2, and then you can just insert like so, and that gives you HTR. And then to give a leaf slice skeleton, you can see it's pretty easy. You can just do sort of a cancellation into like a R2, U2, R2, U2, R2, U2 sort of thing. Just do L2, R2, U2, R2, and that gives leaf slice in 21 moves. And by replacing some of the moves earlier in the skeleton, you can get a +0, which gave me a 21. Now for what I missed, this is just what the DR looks like on normal. And what I believe is the most findable 20 is on this side of the scramble. So on normal, you do U prime, R2, U prime to give 2 quarter turn 2C 4E. It could be U or U prime, doesn't matter because you derive it the same way. And then when going back to normal, we have this is what the cube looks like after those moves on normal and then the EO on inverse. You do L2, and then you insert a B2 turn before finishing the DR. And as you can see, it's just 3 more moves to HTR. You can just do like D prime R2 D, like that. Or U prime B2 U, doesn't really matter. And what you have here is essentially a floppy reduction skip. So you can solve these leaf slice layers with just R2, L2, F2, B2. And the way you do that is just L2, F2, and then like that. That gives leaf slice in 19 moves, and then by doing a rewrite you can't get a +0, but you can get a +1, which would have given a 20. So that's solve number 1. For solve number 2, I got a 20, and I unfortunately missed a 19 on this. However, it is very, very difficult to find. So I really don't feel that bad about missing it. It does use a pretty cool technique though, so I am going to show it. And I do believe it is a findable 19. This was also OCR single for like a few hours until I got a 19 in the next round at the same competition. And this was my 4th official 20. So for this scramble, I did the white front EO axis because it's just 3 moves. It's the best 6 bad case. You have 3 bad edges here, and then you have 3 on the back face over here. And this can just be done in 3 moves. It can be either done with, just a second, forgot to pull up my notes. This can be either done with U prime L2D, or it can be done with D prime B2U. I did U prime L2 D prime. And this doesn't give any instant DR triggers, but if you do an L turn, that gives you DR minus 4C 4E. So after that I switched, and I saw it was just 3 more moves to DR, which is very, very lucky, so it gives a 7 move DR. You already have this bar here, this pair, this corner can attach to make 2 bars in 1 move, and it sets the edges up perfectly. So you just do D2, F prime, and then in the solve I did R prime, and that gave me a 7 move DR with 2 quarter turn 4C 4E, like the standard 2 quarter turn. So here I started by making I made a quarter turn of progress on this side of the scramble by doing L2 and then B prime, and there wasn't really anything great on this side. There were some, I think it was like 5 more moves to HTR on this side. I didn't find anything that way. So I switched back to normal, and I saw that it was just 2 more moves to HTR. So this is an 11 move HTR, which is just completely ridiculous. For solving the F and B layers, since we've done a miss HTR, it's not super worth it to look for double slice reduction stuff, and I don't believe there were any 19s that way from like this specific version of the HTR. And the kind of cool thing about this is I learned from a mistake that I made in my previous OCR Meter 3 where I missed a 21 on solve 2 by not trying to like solve corners and then like restructure the solution to insert whatever remaining edges there were. You can kind of see for these green blue layers like the corners are close to solved, and if you do like U2, B2, U2 like that, you kind of get a 2E, 2E sort of thing, and you can sort of just trace the edges and see that at the very beginning of the solution swapping these 2 and these 2 should give a very short leaf slice skeleton, and that's pretty much what I did. So I did L2, U2, L2, U2, and then at this point I saw that there was a few different ways to finish this. You could either do L2, B2, U2 to give leaf slice in 18, or you could even do B2, U2, B2, L2 to give leaf slice in 19, because this B would cancel on the other side of the skeleton because we did a miss HTR. Unfortunately, there was no way to solve the slice in such a way to give a 19 or even an 18, so I ended up getting a 20 from that skeleton. Now for the missed 19, there's a few ways to explain it, and I believe there's like 2 possible solutions. I consider this one to be the most findable, just in my opinion, because I'm very HTR centric with what I do with DR. And you essentially do like a very complex variation of that 11 move HTR. So this is just what it looks like on normal. Instead of doing that U2F, you essentially insert 4E, 4X before doing those moves, and I'll just explain like on a solved cube, because like F prime U2 was what we had before, and then it was like an L turn, and the idea is you essentially insert an M2, which is a 2 minus 1, before doing those moves. So it just kind of adds a move. So it looks something like R2, D2, B, which essentially does the same thing, and then when we switch, we again have those 2 more moves to HTR. You could do with like L2 and then B, which just gives a slightly different case to before. However, there is a very crazy variation, and this is a technique I didn't even know about until I reconstructed these recently. I actually didn't reconstruct these for a long time because I was just so pissed about missing so much on these scrambles, because like the DRs were, I think, 19.67, assuming you get perfect on all three. So lesson learned, just, you know, rip the band-aid off as soon as possible. But anyways, the variation you do is you essentially take advantage of the fact that the last move of the DR on inverse is R prime, and what you do is you kind of like set it all up to one face, and then you like insert one of these sorts of like N-perm plus 2 swap things, and it ends up cancelling a lot of moves. So it sort of starts with L2B, and then you cancel out the B prime, you cancel out half of the L move, and then you cancel out the entire R move as well. And then you do B2, R prime, L prime, and then you get this HTR in 14 moves. And actually you're meant to do a B prime, not a B. And then here it's just 5 more moves to solve. You don't even need to rewrite the slice. I believe you can get 18 to slice this way if you do like the B2 the other way and then set up to this floppy reduction case, but the way you just get the direct 19 is you do D2, and then like it's pretty clear what the solution is from here. You just do R2. No, maybe it's not that clear. Wow, I'm bad. Yeah, D2, B2, there we go. And then you have 3 more moves that way, and that could have given a 19. So that's for solve number 2, and now on to the last solve of the meme. For solve number 3, I got a 24, which quote-unquote clutched the OCR, but obviously a very disappointing result given that I was averaging between like high 21 and low 22 at the time, and obviously I only needed the 22 to get world record. It was the first time I was ever in this position where I only needed the 22 for record, and I think the nerves very clearly got to me, which is a big shame. Regardless, I will show what I did. So for this scramble, I basically did the same EO as before, and coincidentally, I've also forgotten to pull out my notes like before. So we will do that mid-video. Real professional stuff. It's essentially the same case. It's white front again. It's the 3 move 6 bad EO. You've got 3 here, 3 on the back, and it can be done 2 different ways, and they're both HTR equivalent, which will become relevant later when I go into the 20 that I missed. So the EO that I personally did was D prime, F2, and then U prime. And you can see that it instantly gives 4C4E on this axis, which, you know, in hindsight, I really should have spent a lot more time on, because it would have at the very least led me to the best DR on the scramble and potentially the 20. But what I ended up doing was on this kind of axis of the EO, I did F to give 4C4E in 4 moves, which is still really good. I then switched, and I couldn't see any good way to solve this case on inverse. This is like the 3 moves to RZP. As it turns out, it's a very simple solution if you just start with an R2, and I didn't find that first move to make some pairs, which is really embarrassing. So what I did instead was I solved this case, because we've already got the bar, you just have to make this other bar as well. And the way I did it was I did R to move these pieces around, B2, and then here you can do either RL or R prime L prime. I did RL, and then just 3 more moves to DR by finishing off this, and then L prime, and then in the solve I did F prime, but doesn't matter too much. So this was an 11 move DR, and it was 1/4 turn, which is sort of why I went with it, because after about like 30 to 35 minutes, I really just didn't have much else, and I was kind of hoping that this would be luckier due to the fact that it was 1/4 turn. Turns out it was not the case. From there, I switched to normal, and then I just did this HTR, so I essentially cancelled into the 2E thing, like HTR the corners like that, and then cancel into the 5 mover. So I did D2, and then B2, U2, B2, and then R to give me HTR, and then to give a leave slice skeleton. This isn't like a very good case, but I saw you can make a square with D2, and then I didn't really see anything from here. Like I tried inserting that pair, didn't work, so I tried doing a U2 before doing that. And then here I was able to see the whole solution. You can just do B2, R2, D2, F2, L2, and that gave a leaf slice in 23. And there was no way to solve it in 0 moves, but there was a way to solve it in 1 move, which gave me a 24. And now for the DR I missed. So this is what the scramble looks like without that like F pre-move after the EO. And this is specifically showing the other variation of the EO, since this is what leads to the 20. So again, if you just do, oh no, sorry. So I think I showed, like I didn't see anything after, I think I did find R2, but I realized it like gave like the wrong edges for that case. But if you do a U2, it essentially achieves the same thing of like making a pair, and then you have this kind of case. So I found the R2 and found a DR that way, but I didn't try U2 for some reason. And then here, this is a really good case to know. It's kind of like this L, OLL on both sides, and then one's got like a mismatched pair, the other one has a true pair. And these pairs can kind of sit on top of each other. When you have this with the E-slice, such that the two edges are either here or here, so not diagonal, you can usually solve this like very efficiently. And in this case, it was 4 more moves. Oh, sorry, 5 more moves. You start with an F2, and then you make this pair with R2, and then you do B prime, U2, L, and this would have given a 9 move DR with 3/4 turn, 2C4E, which you can see if you just do an S slice like that. And I'll do the S slice just for visualization purposes. The way you can get a 20 from this is if you do some setup moves. So if you're familiar with this case, you can see that doing a U2 or a D2 gives you a case that visually is always between 5 and 6 more moves to HTR, but you can insert a B2 or an F2 and essentially have this kind of same geometry with the cube. If you do B2, U2, B, like that, or I guess we'll do a wide B, you can see we have this case, and then it's just 4 more moves to HTR, like that. And it's a floppy reduction skip, so you can just do 4 more moves like so, and this gives 20 to slice. And the slice can be solved in 0 moves, which would have given a 20. So a very, very sad attempt. Like I said, had I found that DR and had I gotten optimal on all 3, could have potentially been a sub 20 official mean. To this day, this is still like by far the best set of scrambles I've ever gotten in comp. I do believe I will get a set in the future that is sub 20able. I don't think it's like super crazy uncommon, especially if I spam comps, but definitely does feel like a missed opportunity. So that's it for the mean of 3. I will now show the 19 that I got in the following round of the competition. Now to close out the video, here is the 19, which is still OCR at the time of recording this video, and still my only official sub 20 so far. This was the second scramble for the final. On the previous solve, I had gotten a 34 due to like kind of an emergency situation where I just needed something to at least maybe, you know, podium. So this was like a very weird attempt. I was like a little bit tilted from like round 1 and starting with a 34. But I think even under like more normal conditions, this is something I would likely have ended up checking. But there was a lot of NIS involved just to get the DR to begin with. So the scramble wasn't very good. I don't think there are any sub 5 move non-NIS EOs. I think there were very few ways to even reduce to 4 or less bad edges in 1 move. And there was like no 4 or less bad on offer to begin with. So the EO I did was quite interesting. I did the FB EO, which was initially 8 bad, I believe. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then, yeah, 3 on bottom. So this was 8 bad. And what I did was I did a B prime to reduce to 6 bad, which I believe has like a little more than a 1 in 5 chance of at least getting a 5 move EO, which for a scramble like this I would have been happy to check. But to my surprise, I saw that all 6 of the bad edges were blue and green, and it was a perfect 3-3 split. And by tracing like the missing color from each one, I saw that 2 of them were like adjacent-ish. if that makes sense. So I knew it was going to be 3 more moves. This is a very, very rare EO. I've only personally spotted it in official attempts, I think, 3 times, including this. One of them was actually on the next solve of this comp, but I wasn't able to use it. And then the other one was on, I believe, the second solve of my 21.3 mean, but I didn't even have time to check it because I managed my time so poorly. But anyways, after that, I switched, and it is indeed 3 more moves. So you got the 3 bad here, and then 3 bad in the back. You can either do F prime D2B, or B prime L2F. The one I went with is B prime L2F. And again, these EOs are HTR equivalent due to the fact that, just due to the fact that if you do like the inverse of one and then the other one, you'll have like an HTR-like state. So I switched after looking for like trigger in 5 to 6 on like this side for both. So I was essentially checking both EOs at once by switching. What I saw was that you can do an R turn to give DR minus 4C2E in 5 moves, which is quite good. But on this side of the scramble, it looked awful. So I switched again, and this was the, this was the 4th time I switched just to get a DR. And you can see it's a pretty nice case after that EO. We've got this pair here, this sort of part of the headlight. So we've got most of the components we need to reduce to RU2 R'. We just need to insert this corner while making sure this E-slice edge stays in a good spot. And you can do that by doing D prime L2, and then you can see it's just 4 more moves, like so. And this also has like an HTR equal variation. The one I went with was L, D2, L. So this was an 11 move DR with 1/4 turn corners, very similar to the previous solve, and I did mention that I was kind of hoping on that solve in the previous round that it would be a very lucky case. Wasn't the case that time. Here, however, it was ridiculously lucky. So you can see just on this side, it's 3 more moves to HTR by just doing like U2, B2, U, like that. I didn't find anything that way, but I did see you can insert either an F2 or a B2. So I inserted F2 and then did U2, B2, U, like that. And here I just saw the entire finish. I remembered that the turn on the other side of the scramble was like an R turn. So if I just solve these like non-domino layers, I can potentially cancel some moves. And what I saw was you can do D2. That's not the yellow face. There we go, D2. And then we have like all of these blocks. And then you can finish the layers like that. And then the last 2 moves are R and L. And since we started with an R on the other side of scramble, that turns this from what would be a 21 to a 19 by cancelling 2 moves. So that's how I got a 19 on what I would consider one of the worst scrambles I've gotten in competition. So yeah, funny how that works out. But that's all I have for this video. The next episode / part in this series, I will be showing my 3rd 21.67 mean of 3. And then the last 2 will be the 21.3 and my unofficial PB mean of 3 in some order. So that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the future episodes, and I will see you in the next one.